A man finds a pair of glasses in a church that reveal the true face of the aliens who are secretly controlling Earthlings. Today we will recap the plot of the 1988 film They Live. An unemployed drifter from Colorado named George Nada travels across America looking for a place in the sun. This is how it ends in Los Angeles with tall skyscrapers and great opportunities. A man comes to the employment office to find an official job. A lot of people gathered there who are also looking for work. George has an interview and tells the worker of the employment office about his difficult fate. In his hometown, many businesses suddenly closed down and people became unemployed. The woman listens to George without much interest and says that he does not have enough experience to be employed. The man smiles disappointedly and leaves the employment office. As he continues to wander aimlessly through the city streets, George comes across a preacher and stops to listen to him. The preacher emotionally tells the small group of onlookers that demons have captured the minds of the ruling class of Earth and control ordinary people through them. The man urges listeners to wake up and escape the control of the ruling elites. When Nada notices a police car, she decides to move on. On the way, he sees a strange man who, as if hypnotized, is watching a non-verbal advertisement on the television behind the glass of the store. But Nada doesn't pay much attention to him and wanders on. Eventually, George finds a temporary homeless center and plans to spend the night there. The woman next door is mesmerized by a TV show about a narcissistic star who believes she will never age. George is tired, so he leans back in his chair and sighs heavily, deep in thought. The next day, George visits a construction site and tries to get a job as a laborer there. The foreman at first refuses to take Nada because they only let in workers who are part of the union. However, George looks convincing, so the foreman negotiates a salary and hires him. Like everyone else, a man begins to work in the sweat of his face. Although the issue of his employment is resolved, he will be able to get the money in a few days, so he has nowhere to spend the night again. One of the workers, named Frank, notices the frustrated newcomer and offers to show him a place with food and a hot shower. Nada is initially distrustful of his new acquaintance, but soon decides to follow him. Along the way, the men manage to find something to talk about and bond over. Frank brings the drifter to the camp and introduces him to friendly locals who have come to Los Angeles to seek fortune from all over the world. It is customary here to help each other. Even children feel good in this camp. One of the local men named Gilbert immediately assigns George the task of making the camp cozy. It's lunchtime and George is served a large portion of hearty food. During the meal, Frank tells George about his life. Like George, he moved to another city to find work to support his family, who remained in Detroit. Frank is angry at the local elite, who have lined their pockets with money and shut down almost every factory in his hometown, putting hundreds of people out of work. The man has already lost all patience and is ready to take drastic measures if at least one more plant is closed. Frank believes that the lower classes must fight to survive, so he warns George in a friendly way that he is ready to compete with him for a place in the sun. George is more optimistic. He is determined to work hard and build his life from scratch. In the evening, Nada walks around the campsite and notices how some locals are enthusiastically watching a TV commercial for artificial nails. At some point, the signal breaks and a broadcast with an anxious man appears on the screen. He talks about how everyone lives in an artificial world. According to him, a group of scientists managed to find out that some unknown creatures are sending a special signal to Earth, which puts people into a trance and deprives them of critical thinking. Poor people are on the rise and racial injustice is on the rise. Aliens have brainwashed humans to be indifferent to everything but their own benefit. However, the residents reject the freak's alarming message on TV. They only complain of headaches and change the channel with the broadcasts. George notices a blind priest standing near the group repeating every word of the broadcast. Gilbert immediately runs to the priest. George doesn't hear their exchange, but finds the men arguing. Gilbert leads the old man in a hurry to the church, which is located on the territory of the camp. George's eyes follow the retreating men a little longer and he suspects they have some secret. The next morning, Nada meets Gilbert at the entrance to the camp and decides to ask about his night trip to the church. The man says the church provides a communal kitchen for the homeless and he had to stay there overnight to get everything in order. Additionally, Gilbert informs him that he is singing in the church choir, and the rehearsal begins. The same broadcast with the mysterious man appears on the TV again and he urges the transmission of the hypnotizing signal to be stopped immediately. Once again, the broadcast is causing severe headaches, and the residents are relieved when the TV switches back to a baseball game. Distraught, Gilbert rushes to the church again, and this time George decides to follow him. He can indeed hear the choir singing in the church, so he assumes he won't arouse any suspicion by going inside. In the church, they discover a chemical mini-laboratory and a mysterious inscription on the wall, "They live, we sleep." A man notices a tape recorder, which loudly plays the chorus. It only serves as a cover to drown out the sounds of the secret meeting going on behind the wall. In the next room, Gilbert, the TV man, and other members of the secret group are trying to hack the channel again to play their recording longer and reach more viewers. The members of the group want to get as many people as possible so that they can more effectively and efficiently communicate their ideas to society. When George overhears their conversation, he backs away and stumbles upon a secret safe with a number of boxes. Deciding to leave this mystery for later, he closes the safe and prepares to leave. When he encounters a blind priest, the priest feels his face and hands and then lets go of George. He realizes that George is a worker and immediately starts talking about revolution without hesitation. George is upset by all this and runs out of the church. The preacher yells behind the guy that he will come back eventually. A police helicopter appears and begins circling the church, unnerving those attending the meeting. The helicopter soon takes off and George borrows a pair of binoculars from a local teenager and continuously monitors the goings-on in the building. Gilbert and his henchmen carry the boxes out of the building and put them in the car. George's surveillance is interrupted by Frank. Nada immediately tells her friend about what she just saw in the church. But Frank doesn't want to get into trouble and advises him to stay out of anything that's going on either. Meanwhile, a car full of boxes drives away from the church. George watches the church through binoculars all day, but nothing else happens. In the evening, the police surround the camp and the church. People are confused about what exactly they are guilty of, so they silently observe what is happening. Suddenly, the police, with the help of bulldozers, begin to demolish the numerous tents and trailers of the residents, and they scatter in panic. George watches in horror as the chaos unfolds as the police ruthlessly destroy the lives of good people. The lawmen grab the priest and the preacher from the television and corner them. They desperately try to resist, but the police beat them until they are out of breath. The same fate awaits everyone who does not escape from the camp. George can't do anything to help those already captured by the police, but he does save a teenager cowering in a corner in fear. Barely escaping the police, George and the terrified teenager climb to the top floor of a dilapidated church. After walking through the corridors, they find a room where the remaining survivors are hiding. People do not understand why they were attacked and spend the whole night in shelter. In the morning, they emerge from their hiding place to inspect what is left of the camp after the nightmare of the last night. The camp looks like a hurricane has passed through it, but in the middle of the camp they find a television that surprisingly still works and broadcasts funny commercials. Meanwhile, George decides to investigate a secret vault in the church. Provocative writing on the wall next to it was covered up in yesterday's raid. George finds one preserved box in the pantry, the same as the ones Gilbert hurried away in the car yesterday. Just then, a patrol car drives by the church and George is forced to hide from the law enforcement officers. After finding a safe place, the man opens the box and is disappointed to find dozens of sunglasses inside. He hides the box in a trash can and takes one pair of glasses with him. While walking through town, George decides to put on his glasses and everything around him is suddenly black and white. The whole world, previously so familiar, takes on a completely different form. Over the glasses, every billboard, sign, or headline reads, "Listen, marry, multiply, consume, buy, don't think, watch TV," and so on. Instead of glossy pictures and magazines, they see a set of manipulative phrases and calls for submission. Even people who used to seem ordinary now show their true monstrous faces through glasses. He takes them off and on again several times to make sure the man standing before him really does look like an alien. The strange man watches George suspiciously, but thankfully doesn't say or do anything. George puts his glasses back on and sees "This is your God" written on the bills. He also discovers that every traffic light in the city has transmitters installed that emit a hypnotic voice. He repeats the command over and over, "Sleep." Nada soon understands that not all people are the same. He watches in awe as ordinary people calmly interact with what appear to be alien monsters, and it is immediately clear that monsters are the most successful in society. Entering the supermarket, George pays attention to a politician's speech on TV, and an alien is hiding behind his face. The guy starts laughing hysterically at this revelation. He can't help but insult the lady who pushes him, who also looks like a monster through her glasses. He tries to explain to the ordinary people around that it's a monster standing in front of them, but that just blows his cover. The lady informs the other aliens about a person who can see their true form through the radio in her wristwatch and describes her form. After receiving the message, the other aliens move to him. George runs out into the street, horrified. Here, many aliens stare at him, but the man ignores them and insults the monster. He is then immediately caught by the fake police. They interrogate George and ask him where he got the glasses, but the guy won't say. Then the guards threaten him and try to convince him to join them. However, George does not give up so easily. He beats up law enforcement officers, grabs their guns and gets rid of them. Police cars immediately start arriving at the scene. Armed, George decides to hide in the bank. There he discovers that half of the visitors are also aliens. Fueled by adrenaline, the guy opens fire on the aliens who are hiding under the mask of humans. One of the aliens calls another police team and magically disappears before George can shoot him. In an attempt to escape his alien pursuers, he runs out of the bank and notices a drone following him. George knocks it off and then goes to a gated parking lot where he meets a pretty girl named Holly. Making sure it's human, he takes the girl hostage and orders her to take him to her house. This is the only way he escapes his pursuers, who rush into the bank. At Holly's house, George falls to the floor exhausted and tries to explain the reason for his actions. He apologizes to the girl for the inconvenience caused. He tells her that their world is in danger and that evil creatures have seized power and control everyone around them. George invites Holly to put on her sunglasses and look at her own eyes, but she refuses and doesn't believe him. As the man closes his eyes in exhaustion, Holly tries to quietly walk past him, but he watches her every move. After a while, George calms down and asks his hostage what he is doing. Holly reveals that she works as an assistant director on television. George remembers that the aliens are sending their signal through the television and wants to break it. Once the guy is caught off guard, the girl smashes a bottle over his head and pushes him out the window. After falling from the second floor, George miraculously survives, but loses his sunglasses. Meanwhile, Holly informs the police about what happened and calls the police squad at her address. Forced to hide from the guards again, Nada finds a safe place under a bridge. After dark, the guy gets to another neighborhood and spends the night on the street. The next day, he comes to the construction site to ask Frank for help in fighting the alien creatures. His friend is afraid of him because George just staged a massive shooting and killed a lot of people. George tries to tell Frank that they weren't humans but aliens in disguise, but he won't listen to anything George says and tells him to leave. Then George comes to the place where he hid the box full of sunglasses, but all the trash cans are empty. A man sees a garbage truck parked nearby. He gets on the truck and rummages through the trash to find a pair of surviving glasses. Frank becomes an accidental witness to George's trash adventures. Frank gives his friend his salary and says he can't help him anymore. George urges his friend to put on his glasses so he can see the real world too. But Frank refuses and believes his friend has gone mad. Tired of the disbelief, George decides to punch his friend and a furious fight ensues. In the end, Nada kicks his friend to the ground and forces his glasses on him. Stunned, Frank finally believes George, horrified by reality. The friends rent a room in a nearby motel, where they discuss their next course of action. Frank assumes that there are other people who see the aliens, and they have to look for them. George tells him a story from his childhood. He lived in dire poverty and was constantly abused by his father. The strong class inequality created a hatred between the common people that fueled the aliens all these years. Now George intends to take revenge on them for his broken life. In the morning, the friends meet Gilbert, who is also wearing sunglasses, at the motel. He invites them to a secret meeting of like-minded people taking place that evening. The friends arrive at the address and meet other seers of different ages. They replace sunglasses with modern lenses that are safer for the eyes and provide a clearer image. Gilbert tells them in detail about who these creatures are that have flooded the earth. It turns out that alien invaders are recruiting ordinary people for their own purposes. He promised them wealth and power in return for their faithful service. For them, the earth is just a business and a temporary source of resources to create the third world. All global disasters and climate change are also their work. When the aliens completely exhaust the Earth, they move on to enslave new planets. One of the members of the resistance unit shows Frank an alien watch, which he decides to take. The demonstrators were unable to decipher the secret code on the alien device, which allows them to move freely in space and talk to each other. Gilbert gathers everyone up and says they still don't have enough men for a massive attack. But the group is belligerent and insists that immediate action is needed. Calming the crowd, Gilbert suggests they first find the source of the signal and hack it to wake the people from their trance. Holly appears in the room and gives a hint where the signal might be. She nervously fiddles with George's sunglasses and apologizes to him for what she did. Their conversation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of the police, who open fire on the group. Most of the resistance members were lost trying to escape, but George, Frank, and Holly managed to escape the building unharmed. Armed to the teeth, the friends shoot at the aliens and hide in an alley. George wants to go to the very epicenter of the massacre to find Holly, but Frank prevents him from carrying out his dangerous idea. They try to figure out how the watch works so they can intercept alien communications, but instead unexpectedly open a portal from another world. The cops are getting closer to the friends' hideout, so they have no choice but to jump into the portal. They end up in an underground alien base where they find writings in an unknown language. The friends carefully move through the corridor and come across an alien checkpoint. Creatures in the guise of military personnel are radioed that the operation to eliminate the terrorist group has been successfully completed. The satisfied aliens leave to celebrate their victory, and Frank and George move towards the sounds coming from the end of the corridor. They end up at a gala banquet where a man in an expensive suit gives a eulogy for the alien alliance. He gleefully informs the recruited guests that aliens will soon completely dominate Earth, which will bring enormous benefits to humanity's elite. He then shares the statistics of their success with the audience, causing general delight and applause. The friends are approached by one of the former residents of the camp, who also sided with the attackers. He decides that George and Frank have also been recruited by aliens and is surprised that they are still dressed as poor people. The man decides to give the recruits a tour of the base and takes them to an alien airfield. There, aliens in human form go on trips to other planets in space. Then they get to the backstage of the TV studio, where the control center of the entire operation is located. Through the satellite, the signal is transmitted all over the world and enslaves the consciousness of ordinary people. Through flattery, George gets their tour guide to take them to the TV studio itself. The man agrees, but the guards refuse to let them go without special permission. Then the guys decide to use the Force and shoot the aliens. Their old acquaintance tries to stop them and convince them to submit to the new authority. Aliens have enslaved the entire planet and control every action of humans. He invites them to join the victors and enjoy the benefits the aliens give them for their loyal service. Despite his arguments, the guys have no intention of becoming traitors. One of the soldiers bursts into the room and the traitor uses this moment to move around the space. The friends take their weapons and break through the studio into the main office where the recruits work. George questions the staff, trying to find Holly with their help, but no one knows where she is. However, he learns that the signal that hypnotizes people is located on the roof. The friends immediately go to the top of the building, and on the way they meet Holly, who managed to survive. They shoot at the aliens and the trio eventually rise to the top floor. But Holly turns out to be a traitor and mercilessly shoots Frank in the head before entering the roof. George finds a satellite dish transmitting an alien signal and aims to shoot it. But the girl quietly approaches him from behind and points a gun at him to make him surrender. He refuses and shoots Holly first. He then destroys the satellite dish. The helicopters immediately open fire on George, but as he exits the world, he mockingly shows the aliens his middle finger. George manages to disrupt the signal and humanity finally learns the shocking truth about reality. Now everyone can see that there were extraterrestrial beings hiding among ordinary people who broadcast TV shows, going to the same establishments as them, acting in movies and even forming relationships. Thanks to a simple drifter from Colorado, the world was able to wake up from a long sleep. So what do you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like it, please like the video and subscribe for more movie recaps.